77 that is actually still shaking things up. I mean, Bob completely and continually reinvents himself in his company. He is actually really at the digital edge of advertising. And, you know, creative people are always talking about how many awards they've got and all this sort of stuff. Bob actually has an award that that I don't think anyone else in advertising has. He has an Academy Award. And that's because he's a product of Hollywood. So Bob is Hollywood coming into advertising, and I hope he's going to talk to us a little bit about that today.
Great, thank you. Oh, okay. I don't know how to put my picture in there, but they keep giving me new computers. In any case. My name's Bob Greenberg. I founded a company called RGA, which stands for Robert and Richard Greenberg. We started in 1977 in New York with just two people, a very small apartment that was only 20 feet wide and 20 feet deep, including a staircase. And I slept in a closet. My brother slept in a bookcase that came around. But prior to that, I had worked for my uncle, and I ran a manufacturing facility in Canada that I built with the sales that I created. And so I knew sales, production, and accounting very well. We had about, at the end of when I stayed there, 107,000 square feet and 3 shifts of employees. So I started that when I was 22, and because of set of circumstances, I wound up starting a company with my brother, who was doing motion graphics at a time when there wasn't a name. There was just Sal Bass that preceded him, if some of you know him. He did titles like Vertigo or Psycho. There was Charles Eames, who was also a designer, who did a lot of great films for IBM. And my brother was also offered a job by 2 guys in New York named Pablo and Jose Ferro, who created the opening to Clockwork Orange and Bullet and Thomas Crown Affair and movies like that. And we started our career, we got the opportunity with Steve Frankfurt, who was the previous president of Y&R, and invented the modern motion picture advertising with Rosemary's Baby in its day. And he did a really interesting title sequence called To Kill a Mockingbird. And he brought us in to work on Superman, the movie, which we did the opening titles. They barely made it. The editor took a Concorde back to London, and they barely made it. It was just by an hour or two to integrate it with the film. But it really kicked off our first 9 years of our business. And in that first 9 years, we truly did the most of any company to insert a computer into every process of filmmaking. That's what I would have won a scientific Academy Award for. So we had the first computerized animation camera, the first computerized optical printer, first computerized aerial image projection unit, the first computerized single lens reflex pin register, dual pin register camera system. And one of the first computerized editing facilities, which was called a montage, and it predated everything that eventually became Final Cut and Avid. We have a person that works with us that invented the first paint system ever for Dr. Ed Catmull, who founded Pixar with Elvie Ray Smith, who used to date my assistant. I had the third license of Berkeley Unix, which was bought through Bill Joy, who later founded Sun Microsystems. I worked a lot with Jim Clark. I had his last meeting when he was being managed out of Silicon Graphics, which is where all the computer graphics work was done on SGI machines, these colored boxes that did Terminator and lots of George Lucas's films and those of our Greenberg associates. Movies like Alien and Altered States and Die Hard and Lethal Weapon and on and on. The last thing I worked on was Braveheart, and we did all the visual effects. Mel Gibson's Identity, if there is such a thing, called Icon Productions. We worked on the promotion, the opening titles, etc. The logo for the movie. And then I think the very last thing was Mission Impossible with a group of people there. It taught me that probably the most creatively driven collaborative medium is not what you think. It is the motion picture business, because when you look at an end crawl for a big movie, there might be 1,000 names. So that's the biggest collaborative effort that happens today. Because nobody's trying to steal the job of the cinematographer or the editor or the writer, etc. And as visual effects supervisors and movie title designers and promotion, we always did the promotion of a lot of movies, which would be the logo and the TV and the trailers and the teaser trailers, etc. Also during that period of time, because we were in New York, we worked on over 4,000 commercials. So I know commercials really well. I'm one of the few people in our business that runs an agency that has produced that many commercials. We had editors, directors, copywriters. We had cameras, we had stages, we had everything to do that type of work. We still have within our company a digital studio. I invented film stocks for Kodak, so I know that world very well. I was on their imaging board for Kodak. I also was part of IBM's massive parallel processing effort at Watson Research, so I consulted to them on supercomputers, which were called power visualization. And that's sort of my background, that when I saw the internet really presented to me by Jim Clark, who was being managed out of the company that he founded, who was at Stanford. He created graphics acceleration boards to create these computers that were much faster than anything else you could buy. So when you started to do complex computer graphics, which by the way, I started our company in computer graphics before there was a name computer graphics. And I brought the entire crew, lock, stock, and barrel, who did Tron, the movie, to RGA back in the day. And we created our own software because there's nothing off the shelf. And then later, I bought the third license of Softimage, as an example. So that led me to see, through Jim's discussion of this new company he was going to start, called Mosaic, with Mark Andreessen, who I oddly enough met because my brother was at the University of Illinois and they had a supercomputer lab there. And that's where Mark was. And they started Netscape, which came out of Mosaic. And when I saw the internet, unlike computer graphics, which everybody thought would be a one-trick pony, I thought that the internet was going to be the most important thing in our lives. And because I'm so dyslexic, once you get past the dyslexia, which takes a long time, I didn't even know it until I was 35, you get a pretty good ability to read patterns that are happening, and pattern recognition is a byproduct. And that's why so many dyslexics, Steve Jobs was one as an example, so is Richard Branson, Charles Schwab. A lot of people have, and they have similar childhoods, because I had the lowest test score in the Midwest of the United States. That's really bad. I mean, I asked my mom before she passed on if it was more than Illinois, and she said it was more. I sort of think it might be the Midwest. It could have been the whole United States or Europe for all I know. But if you can't finish 50% of the test, you're not going to do that well. So it's hard to read, and it's hard to write, it's hard to speak, it's hard to add. So it's quite a difficult thing. But as you start to overcome it, you get better every year. I think I'm probably an average reader now. But at the same time, you get this byproduct, which is pattern recognition. And pattern recognition always served me very well, because I always thought everybody saw what I saw, and then I realized that they didn't. And which is just not that long ago that I realized much of that. But it allows you to put together a bunch of inputs and then make a decision on how things might go. It made it very easy for me to understand how computers work. It made it easy for me to understand architecture. And since architecture is a passion of mine, and our agency was really based on the Bauhaus, the very same thing that was the influence for Steve Jobs. If you read the book by Walter Isaacson, where I'd recommend also the article in Fast Company that's about Steve Jobs' wilderness years, they call it, when he, you'll find it online, or you could email me and I'll send you a copy. But there was a guy from Fortune who had 34 to 36 tapes that he found in his garage. And they were 3-hour interviews with Jobs after he got booted out of Apple, and he was starting Next, and before he started, and then when he started with Pixar. So it sort of shows exactly how he created the direction that Apple would subsequently go into. So I've been, after merging together for the first time in our second 9-year, so the first 9 years was really computer-assisted filmmaking. The second was integrating film, video, and computer graphics together for the first time under one roof. And we had about 225 people, and we were located both in New York and in Hollywood during that period. And that had never been done before. I also, in 1993, being on the board of Kodak, and that early on, I said to them, I gave a speech. I didn't know it was being recorded. I didn't know it was being satellited out to all over the place. So I said that the trains think they're in the freight business, but they really should be in the transportation business. The people in TV think they're in the broadcast business, but they should really be in the communications business. And then I said, you guys think you're in the film business, but you really should be in the imaging business. And I was working with their CEO, and I quit right after that speech, ever working with them again. And I would always talk about, even though we were completely film-based, that film was going to go away and it would be replaced with digital video, which we opened up the first digital video suite on the East Coast that was fully digital. People that were in film protested that move pretty heavily because they looked at that as a second cousin. But if you girl with the dragon tattoo, it doesn't have a frame of film in it. So film is dead now, for sure. The red camera system, all the direction that Canon is going with their 5D, 7D cameras, Nikon, whomever. It's not that it's better or worse, it's just that it makes no sense in an integrated system of doing things across multiple screens where all you have is film as an analog medium. So people might hang on to it, but they'd hang on to it as a hobbyist medium. So then I looked in 1993, 94 at 3 agencies as part of an extension of the Mad Men years, which weren't called that back then. I looked at Leo Burnett, I looked at Ogilvy, and I looked at DDB, particularly with Birnbach, who set up the first relationship between an art director and a writer from a creative standpoint. And these 3 people, companies, because of the disruption back then being television, which is what we worked in and also feature films, it was a disruption that made it possible that whole global networks were developed all around the world. And these global networks, which Bob has been part of, I've been part of, became really very large multi-billion-dollar agencies and holding companies, and that's what you see here. I'm part of the holding company called Interpublic Group. I report to Michael Roth, who I had breakfast with this morning. We're the most independent of the agencies inside of a holding company. We'll have to see where AK2A comes out within WPP as an example. But so it's a public company. Even back when I was 22, 23, etc., I reported through a public company, and Deloitte, Haskins & Sells. And I knew what I was getting into when I sold our company to True North Communications, which subsequently was bought by Interpublic Group, and now we're one of their most interesting holdings because we're digitally centered and we're growing so fast. We're in, so going back just one beat, the first 9 years was about computer-assisted filmmaking. The second 9 years was the integration of film, video, and computer graphics. The third 9 years was an interactive boutique. So I knew that we needed to move from special effects and all into an interactive agency model, seeing the web in 93, 94, and starting the agency in 95. And from 95 until 2004, we became a sizable interactive agency, not unlike Barbarian Group might be today or something like that, 360i. And then from 2005 to 2012, we've been working on what we call agency for the digital age. We have 1,300 people. We're in currently 9 offices in 6 countries, and soon to be 12 offices in 7 countries, as we've announced Australia, Sydney, just yesterday, one of the days. And we're also opening in Austin, Texas, and in Los Angeles. Back to Los Angeles because it's the capital of entertainment still, music, movies, elite film out of it, etc. And then also Sydney. So Boston, Sydney, and LA will be added to Singapore, Stockholm, where I'm going next week, Bucharest, London, New York, Chicago, San Francisco, Sao Paulo, and Buenos Aires. So, pardon?
Moscow?
Not yet. But we will have to be in Moscow. Because what we're doing, which I knew in 93, 94, is that I was going to build a replacement for an agency network like Ogilvy. So that's what we're doing. We're going to open 20 more offices. We'll open in every location that we need to be, which is going to be very different than the locations that perhaps an Ogilvy, a Leo Burnett, or a DDB is in, because the bricks and mortar thing can be a problem. You have a lot of issues with that. I think many of the offices have lost their local clients, and then they don't get the global feed, then they close the office, which is sometimes good and sometimes a mistake. But I think where we are the places that we believe we need to be. I think the footprint of Digitas, Razorfish, AKQA might be a little bit different. So we're going to open all these offices, and we'll become a company of 3,000-4,000 people, and we'll be completely, our disruption is different. It's not television. It's certainly not print or radio or outdoors. But it's actually the internet, mobile, and social. So those three are what we know now, and there could be something that comes after social. I knew about mobile. I gave a speech here saying that the third screen, which was mobile, was going to become the first screen, with Anssi Venjoki, the person who was going to become the CEO of Nokia. And then last year, I gave this speech with Barry Waxman, and the interesting part about this is that we're right at the end of our 9-year cycle with the Agency for the Digital Age. So we're going to move from 2013 to 2022. I hope I'm still alive then, but and you know what we did when we pioneered computer-assisted filmmaking is work like this. An integrated digital studio, film, video, and computer graphics. An interactive agency, which was what I mentioned during those years, and a new agency model, which we've been creating for a while. We're in these locations. We now have 1,300 people. We have lots of clients. Everybody can show a client list, but we have them at a C-level relationship, which is important. And I'll skip through some stuff. What I gave in a speech yesterday at the beginning is there's three things that are happening. One is what we call horizontal integration, and this is Coca-Cola moving brands across maybe 500 of them. But there's a lot of commoditization. Vertical integration is more like, this is an example of Exxon taking oil from the ground and bringing it all the way to a retail mobile station. And what we're starting to see is this idea of functional integration, which is where we're going from 2013 to to 2022, and it may not be the best name, but what it means is that you'll have a customer, and they'll be surrounded by products and services. So we gave this speech, Barry and I, last year on Wednesday of that session. It's closely related to Apple because you can see how they've created this ecosystem of products and services, and many of you have all of them or most of them. The last one being the iCloud. Oops, I'm going backwards. Google is very similar. They started with search and now they have all these other things. We worked on Google Wallet as an example. We did the name, we did some of the user experience, we did the event that launched it, etc. BMW's doing it. Amazon's doing it. So Nike's also doing it, and it was a great honor for me to be with Stefan Olander, who's the head of digital sports yesterday, and I presented that Nike is moving into that space along with Amazon, Google, and Apple, but they're doing it for the first time with an agency because we did the fuel band, which is this thing. And the fuel band's an actual product, and it's a service. And so I did an intro for Stefan, and he showed where it's going, he's one of the best speakers I've ever met. We had 117 people working for 2 years on this, which launched February 22nd. And then next week or so, they're going to launch the Nike Plus basketball shoes, which will be worn in the Olympics by their Nike athletes. And they have 5 computers in the shoe, and they can measure how high you jumped, and they can also measure how fast you are off a standing start, and they can measure where you've gone, etc., through GPS enablement. And then we're launching a training tool, which they showed with Pacquiao, Manny Pacquiao, the boxer. I did jump rope with him. It was not so good. You can't even see his rope when he's doing it. And there's exercise they showed the Spanish tennis player, who I can't think of his name, but he's fantastic, doing these exercises, and they're tied to real trainers, etc. It all started with Nike Plus, and when I mentioned Nike Plus has 6 million people in the community, the head of PR for Nike said it just went up to 7 million. But what's even more interesting is this particular device, which is being thought of a lot as the next iPod. It's taking off that fast, and it's only in the United States and the UK right now. But Tim Cook, who's the CEO of Apple, and we do work with Apple on this, is working out the supply chain, and people say he's the best at that in the world. So as they get more to sell, it'll become global.
Nike's mission has always been to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. They've done this in the past by making great products and then telling people about them. 7 years ago, with the launch of Nike Plus, they started a journey that has taken them from being a company that makes shoes and apparel to a products and services company. Nike Plus has grown to 6 million active members using it on average 3 times a week. But now it's about to get even bigger. This year, with the launch of Nike Plus Fuel Band, a metric that measures all activity called Nike Fuel, ties all these products and services together into a connected ecosystem. Like calories, Nike Fuel is a way to gauge your daily activity. But unlike calories, which people burn at different rates depending upon body type, Nike Fuel is the only standard that lets you compare yourself with anyone else, no matter who they are or what they're doing. Walk, run, dance, skateboard, play basketball, it all counts. Nike Fuel Band is the device you wear that tracks everything you do. One button lets you check your fuel, calories, steps, and time. The LED lights change from red to yellow, and when you hit your goal, green.
We've built it to be a motivational game. Getting to your goal every day is the core part of the experience.
When you consistently hit your goal, Fuelie helps you celebrate.
The social part is actually what keeps it really sticky. It's kind of that competition that keeps you coming back. Anyone who you're friends with on Facebook will be in your leaderboard.
When you buy a Fuel Band, you automatically become part of the Nike Plus community, which includes Nike Plus running, training, and basketball. Now the Nike Plus platform is set to grow exponentially with more members who are active every day.
When it came time to launch the product, we came up with one word that summarized it all: counts. Can you count, suckers?
Everything you do counts. That became the basis for the campaign introducing Nike Fuel to the world. Consumer demand was so high, pre-orders sold out within minutes.
What I hope we can see in the metrics is that people have become more active through wearing their Fuel Bands. That for me would be the ultimate measure of our success.
Fuel Band is transforming how we measure performance, and it represents a new mission for Nike as an organization, creating products and services that become a part of people's everyday lives, with motivation built in. It's a commitment we've seen evolve over 2 years of collaborating with Nike on the Fuel experience. From the Fuel metric itself, to the mobile and platform integration, to social engagements, and ultimately the launch of the Fuel Band. This puts Nike in an exclusive family of fast-growing companies that have created functionally integrated systems.
Today's announcement is exciting. I mean, anything to get people moving, me being able to compare my scores with everybody else is going to be cool.
Nike has this saying, if you have a body, you are an athlete, and now this is finally coming true.
In addition to everything that we did, including creating the Nike Plus platform, which is an owned media platform that we did several years back, that allowed during the Olympics in Shanghai for 800,000 people to run in 26 cities virtually or with Nike Plus all at the same time. So that's a campaign that sits on top of a owned media platform, which we created for Nike, so that this thing actually then interacts with that, and it's an evolution of what we're calling functional integration. And as of July, which is right around the corner, we're completely reorganizing RGA to be a completely different agency. We're dropping the name. We did the idea of Make It Count. Wyden did the commercial for something that we created. So just think about how flipped that is as a construct. And that's where we're headed, because we already have probably 125 now people in the product design group, which will compete with Frog and IDEO. And I personally don't believe they understand the digital landscape because they just haven't had to deal with it quite yet. We came out of that background. The other thing is that we have a business consulting group that is going to be led with somebody. He starts in July, who was at the top of Forrester, and before that, Accenture. So we're going after the McKinseys of the world because they're going after our business, but they also don't, in my view, understand the digital landscape. we have a brand agency, which did the name Nook as an example, or we created the Google Wallet, as well as Google Offers. So it's a branding agency, but it would go up against Wolf Owens or something like Pentagram, Interbrand. We also think they don't really understand the digital landscape. The digital landscape is pretty hard to get until you're actually right in the midst of it, and you can see that it's more than websites. Although we are doing the new version of Nike.com, which will be a real innovation in site. E-commerce engines are still incredibly relevant. And let's see if we can do this one more thing.
How do you measure greatness? Quickness? Hustle? Vertical? Nike Plus basketball tracks them all. How high you jump, how quick you are, and how hard you play. So you can compete against your friends, your rivals, and yourself every time you play. Nike Plus basketball allows you to see a game like never before.
So you'll actually be able to photograph somebody else that's playing and actually know how high they jump. So as you start, it's the whole revolution that's happening right now around data. So this Nike Plus Fuel Band won the Grand Prix last night, for one thing. And it was one of two. May or may not make it to titanium, we'll see. It's entered anyway. The only other thing that I can talk about is just the video to help sell it internally, and it's a very different business than the business that I was looking at in 1993 to 95. It's really the it's never about what RGA is doing, by the way. It's about where the industry is moving. So we may be sometimes a little bit ahead of ourselves, but we've never created anything that wasn't something that became big as a construct. We don't have anybody exactly following the way that we do vertical departments and horizontal offerings, but I do believe that that will be the case going down the line because most agencies that have a lot of the same things that we have are very siloed off. And so that's an anti-Bauhaus idea around collaboration. The sum is greater than the individual parts. The other thing is it's going back to the future with two people leading an effort. We call that a singular vision in a collaborative medium, because you can't have a lot of people, then you get into this cluster F kind of stuff, and nothing gets done. So we have that type of situation. In New York, we're taking a 900-person, which might be the largest single agency in New York, on 39th Street, and we're turning it into 7 separate agencies, because I'm going back to a Harvard Business Review article that I read a long time ago, and also something that Jay Shyatt, who was a mentor of mine, told me. How big are you going to get before you get bad? Which is one thing. And I don't know anybody's name anymore because 900 people is too big to manage. So as we put separate management with separate financial, HR, allocations, everything in every unit, we then have 7 people who could run an office. So it's a feeder for actually managing directors because they have P&L exposure, each one. So there's a lot of concepts and things that we don't have time to get into, but the main thing that I think you might take away from this is it still needs to be creatively driven. It can't be some systematic thing that you're doing. There's agencies out there that are getting completely deconstructed right now. So you won't see where they're not profitable, but you'll see where they were this big, and then they become this big and this big. And what that's based on is not being able to transition into digital, not being able to control budgets that go to social. Like when a $30 million budget goes to Facebook and the client isn't spending anymore, then where does it come from? If you have Adobe competing, then a certain amount of money goes to them, or McKinsey, or someone else. Then if you have the digital agencies taken apart, if you have small boutiques that are startups, if you have everybody has an app. So there's these startups that are taking a lot of the talent and the business from companies like Kraft or General Electric or whatever. So it's a very strange environment out there now, as it's not clear where the industry is going. But I can tell you one thing is that it's all about the impact of technology on everything. That is not going to stop because we're some percentage into the information age. And nobody knows how much that is. Is it 14%? People didn't know during the industrial age how far we were in. Is it 28%? Well, whatever it is, it's going to be exponential. So you're going to see the next thing, and I'll leave you with these two ideas. The next two big ideas that are going to be out there, and it's going to really disrupt advertising and marketing just once again in a major way. One is the smart TV. So Jobs, who's a huge fan of, said he had figured that out before he kicked the bucket. And I think he did. And we already see it with Samsung. So you have all these data feeds coming in. You can get your cable you can get a replacement for cable or broadcast from so many different things, including Intel, which is coming up. And then you have, Netflix, and you have different, the web, certainly everything. You have games in there. Then the key is that the biggest disruption around TV was the channel changer, right? The second one was the DVR. Well, what about gesture-based, voice-activated? So if you picture this as a whole grid of images running simultaneously, and you just say, well, go down 3 and 2 to the right, and then you're watching some local live event. Go down 4 and 3 over, and you see somebody on the Letterman show. Also, the gesture-based piece. So you're just moving through stuff. Well, where does a metaphorical television spot fit in that? Somebody has to tell me. Now, I created 4,000 of them, so I think I know what I'm talking about with a metaphorical television spot. But I don't see where it fits. Now, that may just be me with my pattern recognition going wild, but it also might be that that's a real disruption. And you don't have to disrupt stuff so much in order to have a very big disruption. Because think about the music business. That was not a huge disruption, but it took the 20% margins and made them 7%. And that's really screwed up that business. If you have an agency that's running at 11%, then what does it take to bring them down to 7%? Bob and I know about that stuff. It's really not that much, so things are going to continue to evolve. I'll mention that I believe that television used as a representation of a product and service, as a demonstration, like the last pre-current campaign of the iPhone is a good example of where I think things are going to go. And the last thought I'll leave you with is video conferencing. So at RGA, we have video conferencing for everybody. Every single person in every single office. There'll be 12 offices in 7 countries, using global crossings, using Microsoft Link, federated, that means tied to clients, and we can bring up multiple people, bring up presentations, full motion video, lots of people. What happens when that comes to the cell phone, the next generations, couple generations out? You don't think for a moment, I hope, that Google isn't going to solve Siri's problems, because Google cannot lose search, right? I mean, how are they going to lose search? So they're going to put billions into making that 100% useful. And then the Android phone will turn to the Google phone, et cetera, et cetera. So then you're going to see kids walking down the street, and they're not going to be texting. This is 2-3 years out. They're going to be voice activated and video. And then what does that do to advertising and marketing of today, let alone the near future? Because we're not talking 10 years out, we're talking 2 years out, 2 or 3 years. It'd be like fucking Dick Tracy. I mean, it really will be. And you can see where all this stuff's going. So you're part of the future, I can tell by looking at you. You shouldn't be scared of that. That's going to be a great opportunity for you to be the next generation of people. What you always got to keep in mind, creatively driven and around innovation, because otherwise you'll be part of a commoditized group that is going to get left behind. And that this functional integration idea is not just, it's not an idea of ours, it's an absolute evolution, not a revolution, of horizontal and vertical integration becoming products and services surrounding a customer. It's not that big an idea, but it's a hard thing to set up to do. I'll answer just a couple of questions and get out of your way if I can. Anybody? Yes.
I just wanted to ask, with the fuel ban, how that came about. Like, was that a briefing thing, or does Nike see a hole and come to you? Like, how does something like that start?
You know, I honestly don't know how the fuel ban started. It starts with partnership. It starts with trust. It starts with us being an agency for them, a real sizable one, for over 10 years. It starts with the fact that there's an obvious evolution that Stefan Olander led, but that Trevor Edwards and Mark Parker said, how fast can we do this? That's around digital sports, of which this is a small part of where they're going to go. I mean, you can imagine a situation where you have the Olympics with an overlay of all the data that's being fed. So you know, well, what happened with the United States and broad jumping, what happened with the UK and broad jumping. What's the furthest distance anybody's gone? You know, you're starting to see it with the square that sits behind baseball, or the moving football scrimmage line, or anything like that. Even have with soccer, where you can look at it very quickly through triangulation. You could be the ball, you could be any of the players, and you can see the move right after it's played. So it's just the evolution of digital sports was natural, and as we started to talk about it, we came up with the idea of fuel, which, by the way, is no small thing, because Nike is going to own the metric on which sports is measured. Everybody knows when they have a car or a motorcycle what horsepower means. It's not exact. You know, you say it's at 216 horsepower. I mean, we would sort of know what that means. And so if you have 2,000 fuel points, people know what that means. So it's going to become a really big, valuable thing for them, just like Nike Plus has become. Yes, I saw another question. Yes.
Congratulations on your Grand Prix.
Thank you.
When Cirque du Soleil bought Sid Lee the other day, what did you think about that? And what does that say about where those kind of agencies and entertainment companies are getting involved in our business?
I didn't know about that. Who bought them?
Cirque du Soleil. So that's a very large touring circus.
Touring circus, that's
yes, but
great.
They do amazing shows every
Yeah.
year.
So Cirque du Soleil.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
I've lost my voice.
No, that's okay. No, I just couldn't get the accent. But Cirque du Soleil is unbelievable. I mean, that's out of Montreal, and so is Sid Lee, isn't it? Or I'm not sure where.
Yeah, well, they're from Canada. So
Yeah. So it's. I think that's about live events, which they has its own installation permanently in Las Vegas, and they're setting them up around the world, and it's all about live events, and that's one huge thing that they would need is a really creative group to work with them to create something very probably innovative and ongoing, and they saw that it was worth the investment. I think we're going to see a lot of investment in the so-called digital community. Yes.
Well, I keep wondering, you having come from a much larger, I would say much larger industry that is Hollywood, and
it's smaller.
Or let's say a technology industry like Apple, where you have a foot, like technology where you have a foot on it as well. Do you even still care about Cannes and about advertising? Aren't you much larger than that, and your company much larger than that?
No, we're really not. I believe that advertising is moving in this direction. I think advertising and marketing, communications and design are all moving this way. I actually was going to tell you that I think that the most interesting thing is not advertising right now, but it could be that it becomes once again a golden age of the it's not car design. There was a golden age of that, and it's not art and it's not music, and but what it is, can anybody guess what the creative field is that's the most innovative right now by far? Completely stand out, nothing close.
Storytelling?
Which one?
Storytelling?
Maybe, but as it changes, it could wind up being that. But it's architecture. And I got to tell you that this is so closely related to architecture, what we're doing. But also the inspiration comes from there. And I think it also was the inspiration for Steve Jobs and Apple, and also the inspiration for a lot of the people that are doing things I'm most interested in. But when you look at the number of architects, all the way from Tadao Ando to somebody like Shigeru Ban, these are Japanese architects, where you could look at there was an architect who spoke here, whose name I gotta remember.
Zaha, indeed, we went to see the presentation.
Zaha, she's from Iraq or Iran.
Based in London, yeah.
She's unbelievable, but so is Sir Norman Foster, so is Renzo Piano, so is, there's just an endless number of great ones like that. California is from Canada, Frank Gehry. It just goes on, and it's the next big thing after stuff I'm showing you, which we're getting involved in, because we have retail as a capability, and when you get into product, you have a lot of architects working for you. So you're going to get into the integration of physical space, which is going to merge with information, and somebody has to do that. So, you know, who's going to fill that gap of Hani Rashid, who has built an incredible place in Abu Dhabi that needs to have everything interacting with everything. I'm building a project, and the person who did the structural design is the one who built the world's tallest building in Dubai, but out of Skidmore, Owens and Merrill. And Bill Baker is the world's best structural engineer. So even though our house is a small glass house to be an extension of what Mies van der Rohe would have done, which was done in 1951, the Farnsworth House, is what does that mean, and what does green technology mean? What does the fuel grid look like that's going to get dropped over everything? And maybe you should go the direction of green stuff, because that's going to be absolutely huge. So, yes.
What's moving you? What's your ultimate goal? You got all those awards, all that history, you know all those people. So what's next? What's the ultimate goal of all that you're doing?
I don't think you ever get to any ultimate goal where you wouldn't have any road left.
But sometimes
maybe
there
dying.
is a vision, or there's something about what you want to leave in the world. Like,
well, the one thing that I think is important is to create the new agency model, and that will do. We have a roadmap. As I mentioned, we're starting in July. We'll be finished with the reorg by January 1st. January 1st will be the beginning of 2013 to 2022. I mean, I work that way. It's very architectural, and that'll lead us. Social media is just like 1999 web or something. So people want to say, well, how do you measure this stuff? Well, the web was always thought of as being stupid in 1999. They didn't think it would be able to do the things that it does. I had a person come, a COO coming down for a meeting, said, I'll be just a couple minutes. And he was just a couple minutes, but in between that time, I ordered a bunch of stuff from Amazon. And before he entered my office, with just a staircase away, it had already shipped. Think about that. That's like fucking unbelievable. And I think Bezos is, we were involved in the launch of the Microsoft Surface the other day. So we get very involved in technology and things that are happening. I don't want to leave the advertising marketing business. I'll be at Cannes next year.
I think your product concept is actually brilliant. I absolutely think you're doing the right thing to do that, because one of the big issues, and you know this, and why the agencies, the big agencies, are stuck where they are. It's almost impossible to actually reinvent yourself and do business as usual at the same time.
Right.
Because you continue trying to look after existing business, not change your ways too much, and we get, particularly in recession, where you have clients kind of withdrawing into what they know is safe territory. Yeah. To actually reinvent yourself into a new model, get people to think about it. It's a difficult, if not impossible, act. I think by breaking it down into pods like you're doing, I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, that's one way to do it, but you have to remember that ours is, so we do no acquisitions, no roll-ups.
Yeah.
So when we build an office like Sapalo, it's built with two people. They have to be named Paolo and Paula, but they are there. And now it's 58 people going to 75 people by the end of the year. That's very, very difficult to do, because you're starting something from nothing in a city where they tell you all the reasons you're not going to succeed. But it's different than what we haven't seen, what I haven't seen, but the industry needs desperately, is somebody who's going to be a turnaround person. We've seen it in industry. We've seen it happen with IBM, which, by the way, didn't go the way of HP. So we need somebody that's going to come in and take a big agency model, BBD&O, Gray Advertising, Young and Rubicon, whoever it is, And they're going to be the first ones to deconstruct that and add and mash together a bunch of things to have a new version of Weiner. And I do think David Sable is one of the people I like very much. He was the CEO of, or the chairman of Wonderment, and now he's taken over Y&R from Martin Sorrell. And he has the best chance of somebody that I've seen from the outside doing it. But I so want somebody to do that would be great. And then others could see that model and do that. If anybody wants to take anything from our model, we see people doing that. We're all for it. We publish everything. There's nothing not to publish. But what I thought would happen is I thought when I was doing this, it would work just like Leo Burnett, Ogilvy, and DDB, where all of the agencies were pretty much doing the same thing as shown to them by those three and others. And then you have a Wyman Kennedy, you have a really good B2B agency like Ogilvy, you have somebody that has a better office in Mumbai, you have somebody that's a creative small agency or creative mid-size agency, whatever you want to call it. That's what I thought would happen from 95 to now. But then our model just became unique, which was never the interest, and never an interest of mine personally. So we'll see what happens. I'm just charging along my path, but I'd prefer it if somebody would say, hey, this makes sense for Digitas, this makes sense for Razorfish, makes sense for Sapien Nitro, to be organized this way, not with what RGA has, but with what they have, just because it's a logical sort of methodology, just like Ogilvy was a logical methodology, and I was hoping that would happen, and it may happen, which I hope. Yes?
With all the data that we'll be collecting, how do you keep the public from feeling like they're on overload?
Well, I think we've got to figure out how to do that, but I think they're all on overload anyway.
Right.
I mean, if you we worked for Walmart, and a Walmart mom is an average combined income of $50,000 with a couple of kids, and they are completely overloaded. They're completely online. They're completely mobily centered. And it's just life today is like hyperspeed. And I think anywhere in the world that you go just about, the impact of technology has made everybody overloaded. And everybody would love for this stuff to stop. The point that I was making is it's not going to. It's going to get exponentially more complicated. I have 4 phones. Can't even keep them charged. You know, it's just insane. And I have to have them because we have different clients. And, you know, I have to have a Microsoft, what they call Metro interface on a Nokia phone. I have to have a Android phone. I have to have a BlackBerry, and I have to have an iPhone. It's insane. And then an iPad and a Surface thing. It's different computers, PCs and Macs, and Intel that goes between the two. And I'm not even good at this shit. It's like, you know, I got a very big systems department. I've never been good at that. I understand how it works. I'm not a power user. I would struggle with getting it integrated with the projector. It's just that, and then I'm always traveling. Bob and I were talking about that. As I was walking down from the stage last night, getting the Grand Prix, I told Nick Law that he is now Chief Global Creative Director. And he said, he's Australian, he said, thanks, mate. And I said, I got to get off the fucking road. I'm going to die in these airports, you know? It's like, I can't just, so that's why we're restructuring. I'm taking my executive team, the whole executive team. It's about 20 people. And I ran a United Airline ad that Bob might remember. There was a guy, he was the CEO, handing out tickets to all of his people with United Airlines. And because they have to go visit the customers, which are the clients, which in our case are the people that are running companies. And then they said, well, where are you going? And he said, well, I'm going to see the one that we just lost. And that's where I'm going. I'm going to see a client that we just lost. So I just showed that commercial. It was done a long time ago, brilliantly by maybe Leo Burnett or whomever, I don't know. It holds up. I just remembered it, and somebody found it because of YouTube, and then it's totally relevant. And more and more we're going to have to be all over the. If we're 12 locations in 7 countries, there's going to be a lot of traveling to be done. And as we open up more and more companies around the world, we're going to have to do that. But Bob, you were at Saatchi. Saatchi's gigantic. How many offices?
We had 135 offices in 97 countries.
It's just gigantic. And they built these networks primarily around the disruption being TV. And that is, so all that we're doing is, I'm 64. So I got to do things fast. I feel like the pressure of jobs. I'm getting this thing implemented because it's such a hard thing to do. And that, I don't look back. Like last year we met our numbers, and last year we did very well, and we grew 26%. And why would I ever look back? There's no reason to look back. Got to look forward. So in looking forward, when I started to do my thing with the restructuring, I was in fights with everybody. I felt like Steve Jobs, except I was trying not to be mean, because he comes out the way. He fired people between the 3rd and the 4th floor, And I in the elevator, and I just had to make decisions. You just have to say, no, that's not how it's going to go. It's going to go this way. And this person's got to move over here, and this person's got to find a new job. The good thing about RGA is we've never had anybody leave our company from the beginning to now that hasn't found a higher paying job somewhere else. So I'm not like running Whirlpool where they're laying people off, and these people can't get employed for 2 years, or maybe with a union and everything else. That's not what we have here. So I don't have to worry about that piece, but I do have to worry about us moving forward, regardless of anything else. You have to also be able to make a profit. So I don't quite buy into it, and I'll just mention that to Bob, that they can't be doing the 2 things at the same time. I don't think it's any harder or easier. It's just not been done yet. That they would be able to. The reason isn't the reason that people think. The reason why agencies aren't able to deconstruct and rebuild is because none of the holding companies will give the big agencies the leeway to start to invest in that change. And that's a big difference.
That is true.
And they just won't allow it because they have shareholders and stuff like that. I did that at the beginning. I lost $17 million. When I took all of the people that we had at RGA that were doing feature films and graphics and everything else, commercials, only of the 225, only 30 came with me. Nobody wanted to come to something which was the internet, where you couldn't even move a photograph around. And they were doing Braveheart and Mission Impossible. And the last commercial we did was with Jordan. So why would they want to leave the highest end theme and go to something where you couldn't even move a bloody... they had this thing on the subnet of Razorfish where they had a guy who blew a smoke ring, and everybody went crazy. You know, it was like, whoa.
Animated GIF.
It was an animated GIF, and we did the first site in Java. So we had anyway, you know, things evolved and changed, and I knew that it would turn into motion graphics at its highest level and all this stuff, pattern recognition. But it's been a struggle for us too. You know, it's not been easy. I'll ask one more question and go get out of your way. Yes.
So what do you think drives? Is it the technology that drives an idea, or is it the idea that drives the technology? So you have an idea, then you develop the technology, or does it sometimes the technology comes your way and then you decide, oh, let's use this?
I think the first thing that you got to do is get out of one's mind the idea that there's a separation between a creative person and a technologist. And I helped create, we argued like crazy, the creative technologist track at VCU for Rick Boyko. Because it had to go through, it's a state university, it took 3 years. But I said I would never, people at our company were pissed off that we used that term. Really what it is that creative people have to be technically astute, and technical people have to be creative. So when you sit down with a group of people led by a couple of people who are keeping the theme on with the vision, you want to have good ideas come from anywhere. And if you could capture those coming from people that are junior and just entered the company, the agency, or ones that are long-term tenured types of people, I think the main thing is there has to be a new version of planning. I think planning strategy don't get to an insight fast enough. So we're restructuring around that. But the people that can come up with an idea can come from anywhere. And I think, thank you very much.